They say when you leave your body too often, carried away by the thoughts, eventually something else learns to fill the space, or worse, you forget who you are. Hello, friend. My name is Lauren. I am a mindfulness coach, a storyteller, and someone who knows. Sometimes the scariest things aren't what go bump in the night, but it's the things we never sit still long enough to hear. I love getting to create our guided meditations and taking you on those journeys. And I'm also a bit of a horror buff. So I had this great idea. Well, I think it's great. And I'm so excited to share with you my newest creation. I call this Stillness in the Dark. This will be a mini-series type of collection with 8 fictional stories, all brought to you straight from yours truly. But with each story, there's something not quite right. While these stories aren't true, the skills I've woven into them are very real. Tonight's story explores the first skill of mindfulness, present moment awareness, and talks about how sometimes the practice of drifting away is more than just losing your focus. Her name was Gabrielle. She was the kind of person who tries hard and pretends to be okay, even when she wasn't. After her breakup with her longtime partner, she said yes to house-sitting a farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere for somebody she didn't even know. It was a coworker's cousin, and there were no neighbors in sight. She hadn't even seen a house for the last few miles on her drive in, just the dense forest. She told her friend it would be a great time for her to process and heal, but she would soon learn healing has rules, and this house enforces them. At first, it was peaceful, cozy seating by a fireplace, quiet mornings, cold coffee, and in the afternoons, the sunbeams would stretch across the floorboards. The Wi-Fi barely worked, and the cell service was terrible, which Gabrielle actually felt like was a gift. She planned on how she would meditate and journal and maybe finish that book on mindfulness that she kept pretending she had already read. On the second night in the house, Gabrielle was rinsing off her dinner dishes and tidying up after her meal, while thinking afterwards she would check her phone, see how the Wi-Fi was, and see if she could catch a couple updates from her friends on Instagram before settling in for the night. She stepped out of the kitchen and around to the adjoining bar to grab her phone where she knew she had left it on the charger. But her phone wasn't there. It was across the way in the dining room, sitting on the table. Now, this wasn't an area she had spent much time in, but she just shook it off. She told herself she probably just set her phone on the table walking by when she wasn't really paying attention. Gabrielle opened her phone and felt a twinge of disappointment when she saw one blinking bar. She put her phone back on the charger, double-checking its connection, and went into the kitchen to get herself a drink. But when she looked up, she was walking into the living room area. She blamed it on her own mind. She told herself, Gabrielle, you're just tired, you're in new surroundings, you just turned wrong. But deep down, something else whispered, pay attention. She took herself to her room, changed into her pajamas, brushed her teeth, and settled in with the book. But it didn't take Gabrielle long to doze off. All through the next day, she had this feeling that something was off, but she couldn't quite describe it. But something wasn't right, and nothing was where it was supposed to be. Maybe something was the salt was a couple inches over from where she'd left it, and lights were on that she would swear she had already turned off. It was the third night when things changed. She stood in the kitchen, having just spilled a glass of water. She was mid-thought, something about how healing requires routine. She reached for the drawer handle to get a towel, and suddenly there was this loud humming noise. And all of a sudden, she was in the upstairs hallway. Now, things weren't just in the wrong place. She was too. There was no spilled water, no recollection of having walked up there. She was just standing there, staring at a closed door that she knew had not been there before. She reached for the doorknob, and suddenly she found herself back in the kitchen, cleaning up the water, one hand still on the drawer. This was too weird, and she couldn't figure out what was triggering it. Was it her? Was it the house? So she decided to start testing it out. She'd go into the dining room and sit at the head of the big family table, close her eyes real tight, and focus on her breath. And she'd count to herself, 1, 2, 3, and quick, she would open her eyes. And she'd find herself in another room of the house. As the day wore into night, she didn't have much of an appetite, but she felt exhausted from the mind-boggling day she had trying so hard to make sense of all this. Just jumping from one place to the next, mind spiraling, trying to understand. She took herself to bed, leaving the bedside lamp on, not so much for comfort, but more for reassurance that she would be able to open her eyes and see that she was still in the bed. And she checked this a couple times, opening and closing her eyes. She woke up in the middle of the night with mud on her feet. Not a metaphor, not a dream. Her feet were damp and dirty, and there were her tracks leading right out of the bedroom door into the hallway. The front door was locked, her shoes were dry, and there was a faint hum that she couldn't pinpoint. She stared down at a towel that was wrapped around one of her feet, like it could explain something. And for a moment, she knew something was watching her. Not a presence, a pattern. Her heart didn't race. She didn't get frightened because somewhere deep down, a part of Gabrielle already knew. She wasn't just losing time. She was being relocated somehow. The next day, she considered leaving. She'd used the landline at the house to call the owners but was only able to leave them a message. And her cell worked just long enough for her to let her friend know that she was doing great with all the time away, adding to her story that she felt more grounded than ever before. It wasn't like a horror movie, hair standing on the back of your neck type of feeling, so Gabrielle just kept telling herself whatever she was feeling was wrong. It was stupid. She just must be crazy. She tried meditating for about 10 minutes, but found her thoughts kept wandering to the strange things happening in the house. She tried doing some yoga, but didn't quite know how to move her body without following a YouTube coach. So she grabbed a snack, settled on the back porch with her book to get back to the healing. As the evening came on, Gabrielle moved into the living room and popped an old VHS into the player. She clicked on the TV and settled into the overstuffed couch with a blanket. It was a movie she had seen 1,000 times growing up, but she kept noticing the movie was 5 or 10 minutes ahead or past the scene she'd remembered watching. Was the VHS messing up? The picture looked okay and the tracking wasn't off, but there came that feeling again, as if something was watching her. And there was that hum. Gabrielle sat up and muted the TV. She decided she was going to test this out one more time. Sitting tall and cross-legged on the couch, she took a deep breath in and a deep exhale out. When she focused, she stayed. But the moment her thoughts drifted back to him and their fight, back to what she said when her best friend asked her opinion of her new boyfriend, right before she stopped answering Gabrielle's calls, to how her mother rarely answered her phone calls anymore or always sounded exasperated when she did. And just like that, the hum would return and she was transported to somewhere else in the house. The attic, the spare rooms, the backyards, just staring at the wind chimes. She started marking time by her movements, not the clock, but by the jumps. And something was always slightly wrong. The books on the shelves changed titles. In the attic, there was an extra rocking chair she knew wasn't there before. And once, she even walked into the hallway and saw herself, a past version of herself wearing yesterday's outfit, walking in the opposite direction, completely unaware. On the 5th night, she did the same thing as the previous nights. She changed into her pajamas, brushed her teeth, settled into the bed, and blinked her eyes open and closed a couple times to make sure she was staying where she intended to be, in the bed. But when she opened her eyes this time, there was nothing. Not even darkness. No walls, no windows, no furniture, just an endless white. And that same dense humming, like air vibrating just beyond the range of sound. She tried to run. Her feet moved, but nothing changed. She tried to shout. She tried to scream, but no voice came. She knew this wasn't panic. It was detachment. There was no ground, but she collapsed, For a moment, that apathy felt like comfort, such a relief compared to the spirals of her autopilot. But the emptiness was so vast, it was almost crushing. And then she remembered something from a meditation app she had downloaded some time ago. She had paid $40 to join this app, but she never paid much attention to it after the first couple days. But this mantra rang out in her void: anchor to your body, anchor to the breath, anchor to the body, anchor to the breath. And she did. She breathed, not to escape, not to fix, but to feel. Gabrielle inhaled, noticing a faint tightness in her ribs. With an exhale, she noticed the temperature shift on her skin. The hum softened and the bright white light dimmed. And then a door appeared. It just came to be there. Gabrielle took a deep breath before grabbing the doorknob. Feeling the cool metal in her hand, she turned it, opened the door, and stepped through. She was in the kitchen again, the glass still tipped over on the counter, water slowly spilling, and one hand still on the drawer handle. It had been seconds, not days, but she had changed. After that night, the house stopped shifting. The white room never returned. She knew it was because she stopped drifting, stopped avoiding. Friend, awareness is more than noticing, it's inhabiting. The house wasn't haunted, it was responsive. It was a reflection of her own presence, or lack thereof. All right, friend, thank you so much for joining me for my story today. Make sure you tune in next week where I'll have a new one for you if you liked this one, and share it to a friend who likes that ooky spooky stories. We're past July 4th now, so if you ask me, it is spooky season. And yeah, I'm really excited about this one. I hope y'all enjoy it and like it. I was kind of sad and thinking, wow, I can't believe we're already wrapping up on the 8 Skills of Mindfulness series. And I still have so much for y'all. I am nowhere near done, but we're still going to do the mindful living practices, yoga modifications, meditations, all that. But I had this phenomenal idea. I think it is, at least, that what if, like Blumhouse Productions, one of my favorite horror producers companies, and Mr. Ballin, one of the best storytellers, and Torches, let me just throw all that in a blender and see what we got. This is it, 8 stories, one for each of the skills. So I really hope you enjoyed this one and stick around for the coming weeks to see what's next. Thank you so much for sharing a piece of your day with me, friends. Stay present, stay kind to yourself, and I will see you soon.